Why buying a house will keep you poor? An answer for that question requires a little dig up in the past. So, you're a bank in the early 90s and you want to make more money. Your biggest money maker has always been mortgages. People taking out loans to buy a house, but buying a home at the time, even with mortgage, was reserved for the upper class. The home ownership was rare for the 90s. If you look at the history of 18s, obviously there were narratives or stories about government giving away lands for free in the western territories of United States. But really home ownership or owning your own home was a privilege, not something for the common man, and even sell the mortgage back then were pretty bad. You had to make a 50% down payment, and the mortgage was only for 5 years. So if someone wanted to buy a $100,000 house, they would have to pay $50,000 upfront, make interest only payments for 5 years, and at the end of them 5 years they will have to pay the remaining $50,000 all at once. For the average man, it wasn't really economic at all. If the banks wanted to make more money, they had to make mortgages more accessible to the common people to get the public health or mortgages. Today, most of the people who have mortgages can't pay the money for their home. They will die in debts, passing the burden of paying the debts to their children. Living in a state of living where the vast majority of your income is used on paying the mortgage. This phenomenon is called house poor. House poor is a term used to describe a person who spends a large proportion of his or her total income on home ownership, including mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance, and utilities. People can find themselves in the situation for a number of reasons. In some cases, a consumer may have underestimated their total cost, or a change in income that drastically changed their money capabilities. But buying a house is part of the American dream, so a lot of people don't care about the consequences. And this was the plan that banks had always had in mind since the 90s. In the 1933, the government was trying to figure out a way to uplift the economy, and the President Roosevelt came up with a new deal designed to boost the economy and promote consumerism. And part of the deal was the creation of the Federal Housing Administration. Its job was to encourage more people to buy homes, so the people will work harder. You see, when you own something, you feel important, so you tend to be more productive. This federation changed the game of the banks forever, as the 7, 10, and 50 years mortgages were born. These mortgages allowed more people to buy a house, and more people buying a house equals more money to the bank. But what's the difference between the previous mortgage system? Instead of splitting the payment into two and making interest payments over the 5 years, the 7, 10, and 50 mortgages will have people make a smaller down payment to start out instead of a big one, and at the end they will have to make monthly payments for the rest of the 50 years, where every month you pay down some of the principal and interest at the same time. Much more economical for the normal people. With the new system, also the middle and lower class could afford to take out mortgages. As more people take mortgages, there is more demand and you will have the house price going up. With home prices up because more people buying now, people couldn't even afford a 50 years mortgage, so the banks introduced the 30 years mortgage. With the 30 years mortgage, you will have lower monthly payments than the 15 years mortgages. With a 30 years mortgage, in the early years of it, you will actually be paying down the interest instead of the principal. This is called amortization. In the 50 years mortgage, vast majority of your income will pay down the principal and not the interest. And the longer the mortgage is, the bigger the interest you will pay. And with a 30 years mortgage, you end up paying double the amount of the house because of the interest. With a 30 years mortgage, you will have more time to pay off it. And if you pay off your mortgage, things will be all safe and good. But this type of mortgage was never meant to be paid off. Some people will pay off their mortgage, but many ought not, because many people in the lifespan of their life will transfer to other houses for various problems. So they sell their house and they go into another mortgage, and so they will spend all the money on interest, and hardly any on paying their principal balance. So they won't build equity, and it just goes like this every time they move on. When you get a new mortgage, you make zero progress on paying the principal and you will just pay the interest all over again, tapping each time into more debt than ever. And eventually, if you move out like 5 times in a lifespan, the 30 years amortization clock will reset 5 times. And when you get old, you will still have to finish paying the principal. And what happens? We get older and made zero progress on paying the principal because each time you move out, you just pay the interest. And you will eventually die from old age, and the debts that you made will transfer into your kids. In the end, the bank always wins, and you will just be living a slave life trying to pay off your never ending mortgage. Now you know the proverb that says history repeats itself, because it's true. Right now, everyone has a 30 years mortgage. There is more demand, and houses prices went up. Now, not everyone can afford a 30 years mortgage. So the banks made up the 40 years mortgage. I don't need to say that if you take it, you are destined to live a debt of life. To live a life full of debt. And I don't need to say it because you will. Now, how to escape this never-ending cycle of debts? There are two methods. If you are in your 20s and you don't have a mortgage yet, you can live in renting for all your life. So when you need to move out, you won't be in debt. Also, renting has another advantage, like having no maintenance cost or paying bills and not having property taxes. Another area of advantages for renters is that they have to pay a security deposit equals of just 1 month's rent, and when they move out, the deposit is returned to them. If you have a mortgage, there is one way to not be stuck to that loop. It is simply paying the mortgage in as early as 5 to 7 years, so you won't have to pay any extra into the existing mortgage. You see, the faster you pay the mortgage, the faster you escape the trap. Thanks everyone for watching and see you in the next video.